Okay. Hello, everyone. Hope you are all safe and well. Yes, we are passing through an unprecedented time, but I believe there is a light shining at the end of the tunnel. Uh, we'll all pray for a better day. Now, I would like to call upon our CEO, Mr. Andy Giri, who will be giving a brief introduction about the organization. Over to you, Mr. Giri.
Thanks, Sridhar. Welcome to our gathering. Softsquare is a premium Salesforce partner, has been a partner for the last 12 years. We practice across the length and breadth of the Salesforce ecosystem. As you can see from the slide, we have ventured into almost every aspect of the Salesforce ecosystem, including Sales Cloud, Service Cloud when we started off 12 years back, and now we have forayed into Consumer Goods Cloud, MuleSoft, and the latest kid in the block is Work.com. We were featured in last year's Dreamforce among the top 20 product development partners globally. PDOs are actually partners who help ISVs build products for the App Exchange, and that's a specialized area. Here comes our customer list. As you know very well, the two most important factors to prevent COVID-19 infections are wearing a mask, and the second one is contact tracing and quarantine. And today's webinar is focused towards that. And before we get into the webinar, I wanted to highlight a couple of case studies involving mobile automation to complement Salesforce's Work.com contact tracing solution. The two projects that I'm highlighting have been in our anvil for more than 5 years. The first one was a mobile app that we built for a Florida hospital to do asset management, to track ventilators and other hardware based on barcode. That was the first mobile project we did for the Force.com ecosystem. The differentiator was the ability to build offline mobile apps complementing Salesforce's Salesforce One technology. The second one we did has been our client for the last 6 years. It's a tool called Extensible Assessment Manager on the App Exchange, powered by the Force.com platform. This software called Exam is being used by US federal government clients like HUD, Housing and Urban Development, the VA, Veterans Administration, and LA Unified School District. Exam technology has been used by security inspectors across 200 schools in 23 states of the United States. Exam has evolved from being an assessment tool to be a communication and collaboration tool, all mobile. So with this highlight about our company, I would like to move on to our data scientist and COVID-19 technology specialist, Alex Peters' presentation. The important topic of today, in the fifth of our series, is going to explain, he's going to explain how Softsquare's contact tracking mobile technology complements Salesforce Work.com's contact tracing technology. Here you go, Alex.
If we look at it, we looked at the employee health screening in the first few webinars, then we looked at shift management. So in today's final webinar on the reopening, we're looking at contact tracing. So we're going to go through this journey and explain how all these three methods fit together for reopening and what are the tools and strategies we have in place. As we have seen, simple solutions such as a mask and social distancing has significantly reduced the infection of this pandemic. Very simple, a mask and social distancing. But to sustain and stop this infection while reopening your organization, while reopening schools, while reopening a large congregation of people, how do we practice strict social distancing guidelines? So that is what we want to discuss today, and how we can create a solution that has both people and technology and social healthcare professionals kind of mixed up together to mitigate this risk. Next slide, please. So Dr. Mike Reed is one of the very early adopters of contact tracing. The word tracing was kind of invented there. The concept is to prevent the second outbreak as we open schools and companies. Okay, next slide, please. So This is the guideline from CDC, which is also similar to the WHO around the world. This guideline provides the process that we would take once we have identified that an employee in your organization may have been exposed to COVID-19. Now, the reason we're getting to this stage is because the CDC guideline seems to now push the patient assessment, monitoring, and case management to the reopening companies. And this is kind of a new way for them to decentralize the task from hospitals to companies. And that's what's happening. It's CDC and other government agencies are looking to the actual companies and schools and institutions, state, city, to help with student patient assessment, monitoring, and case management. So that's why you have a nice workflow here where it looks like a hospital management application. So if you look at the salesforcework.com, you can see how some of the components there looks like it's a medical record system or patient management system. And that's because it's a guideline that comes from this CDC initiative. And again, Salesforce has positioned itself well with Health Cloud to kind of bring up use their components from the Health Cloud to enforce some of these CDC guidelines. Okay, let's go to the next slide, please. So from the CDC guideline, they have identified there's two major areas. One is the case management, that is the after the fact, and the other one is proximity tracing and exposure notification. And for them, tracing is important from a CDC, from an infectious disease perspective. For them, tracing it and containing that is an important part. And that is what we're at that stage now where we're mostly focusing on tracing. Since the COVID-19 infection is 6-7 months in, now is a time to trace and start reducing the infection. And that is what we're doing now, containing the infection. So they have two options. They're saying there's either a voluntary opt-in, and another one is to use technologies like Bluetooth or GPS or some type of approximation to detect this. So they're kind of proposing that in a very broad sense. So it's when we implement a solution like this, we are in line with CDC. So if we implement a solution, we kind of get a pass to say, okay, yes, it is a medical device. So we can kind of have that context because of the urgency of the matter. Before implementing a device like this in the past, we would have to go through rigorous tests and clinical trials and things. At this time, the Bluetooth and GPS and mobile phone technologies can be used, and the barrier to entry is a much faster. That's an opportunity space, and at the same time, it's also a much needed space. Okay, let's go to now these are the different areas: patient identification and follow-up, contact identification, contact notification, and contact follow-up. There are strict guidelines for each one of these sections. So we're just going to quickly glance. We went through this in the previous webinar. So we're going to just quickly go through this. Next slide, please. So this is the patient identification and follow-up. There's a triage, case assigned, patient interviewed. And obviously the last stage is the medical provider. Next slide, please. We will share these slides with you. Again, this is contact identification, some guidelines there. As you can see, one of the key legal points is consent and privacy. So before getting into any of this, CDC recommends that we have a clear consent and guideline that the employee has to accept before getting into this. Okay, and let's go to the next slide, please. And the final one is, this is where the employee in the health officer in your organization would have to help with this, which is the contact self-quarantined, test if available, contact follow-up daily, and then referring to a medical professional. This contact follow-up daily, who does that in your organization? Do you have a health officer? Is there a manager that's dedicated to do this? So this process of constantly monitoring the employees in your organization who have been infected or who have been quarantined and following up with them and managing that. That is something now being pushed to the companies and not the healthcare professionals due to the volume. So that's why having a tool like Salesforce.com, Work.com, Health Cloud is critical, because to manage a system like this and have all this integration in place, it's no longer just mask and social distancing and a health survey question. It's a much more complicated model. Okay, let's go to the next slide, please. Now here is the contact tracking journey that our marketing manager, Sridhar, is going to explain. And once he's done explaining this, we're going to go through and take a look at how it's actually done. Go ahead, Sridhar.
Thank you, Alex. Now I would like to shift your focus into the diagram given in this slide. This diagram portrays the entire contact tracking journey right from inception. Now, as discussed in the previous webinars, the entire process starts by triggering a wellness survey. If the survey is passed, the employee is deemed fit to return to work and the shift management workflow is triggered. But if the employee fails, the contact tracking workflow is triggered. Now, post a medical check, if the employee is tested positive for COVID-19, a visual representation of the contact tracing graph will be created by this workflow. The details such as touch points, interactions, and everything that the employee had been interacting with for the past 16 days will be fed into the system by our Softsquare contact tracking bot. Following this, the employee enrolls into a care program with daily COVID surveys to track his or her status. A health officer from the organization is assigned to care for the employee and monitor the health status until recovery. Post-COVID recovery, this entire cycle restarts. Now let's take a look at the live application. Back to you, Alex.
Previous slide, please. There we go, the previous slide. Thank you. Actually, the next slide. There we go. So I just wanted to quickly, before we go right into the actual live application, about what we're doing with contact tracing versus contact tracking. There's two different terminologies, and it's a little tongue twister. So I just wanted to kind of distinguish the two, and kind of visually you can see what our application is doing. So social distancing is a behavior. Everyone has to be 6 feet apart, and there's some kind of a guideline for that, but it is a behavior that is self-managed. And then a mask is what CDC classifies as a personal protective equipment, PPE, that's what they call it. So a gloves, a mask, a sanitizer, all those things are PPEs. So when we look at a behavior and a tool, the mask is a tool and social distancing is a behavior. So how can you manage a behavior in a crowd, in schools, in offices, when there's a lot of folks moving back and forth and there's meetings? So how do you manage that? So that is where we figured there has to be an automated way to provide some type of tracking before you can do tracing, right? So we are tracking so that that's used in the contact tracing module in Salesforce, and that's what we're going to take a look at. Now, in order to understand how this social distancing proximity works, we need to understand a little bit about Bluetooth low energy technology. There is the Bluetooth technology that we use to connect to speakers, and we use to connect to different IoT devices, but it takes up a lot of battery life on your mobile device. But now there is a protocol called Bluetooth Low Energy, BLE, which is constantly running in your phone, but it does not take up that much resources from your phone, such as data plan or the battery life. So what we're doing is we're using a combination combination of Bluetooth technology along with the different sensors in your phone, such as the gyroscope, the motion sensor, to turn it on and off and to keep track of how when somebody comes close to two mobile devices. So we have also optimized it and created some algorithms to provide that elegant usage, which is when you're sitting in a meeting room and your phone is in the table and it's not moving, we don't use any of the signals, we just let it sleep. And then when it moves, that's when we activate the Bluetooth. And also the proximity, how often, every 30 seconds, every 1 minute. So we have optimized it and we can always customize it for each company's need. That is the Bluetooth technology. The Bluetooth is similar to your cellular phone technology. It can go through walls. It's not a vision or a point of sight based technology. It's more of a signal strength between two devices. Like when you have a radio station or your phone, when you go away from the cell tower, the signal decreases. When you come closer to it, it increases. That's the type of technology we're using, is radio frequency signal strength. That's, from a broad perspective, that's what it is. So as you can see in this application, two employees have their phones in their pocket and they're talking to each other. Now this is a headless system, so they don't have to go and activate anything. It's already in their pockets. As they come close to each other, there is this signal gets transmitted to the Salesforce employee object. So automatically it'll have this information that Alex was 3 feet away from Mary. And at that point, there is a social distancing violation. And so it gets recorded there. And at the same time, we also have a process where it can say, oh, they had a mask, so it's okay. So, but the gist of the technology is to track how many people Alex has interacted with, how many people Mary has interacted with. That's our focus, is the tracing part, right? How do you trace how many employees Alex has interacted with? So, and in order to kind of take this to the next level, let's just think of it from a broad perspective. You can have a proximity alarm for schools. If you have a lot of children in schools and if they're coming close to each other, there's going to be an alarm or a buzzer that buzzes, and it does not have to be a mobile device. So we have written this Bluetooth stack in such a way it could be part of a very low cost beacon that the students can have in their pocket, or a badge that has a low cost Bluetooth low energy transmission. Some of these Bluetooth low energy transmission, the battery can last up to 2 years. So this technology has been evolved over time. It was used originally in museums. I have deployed it in different locations in the museums to track when a particular visitor comes close to a painting. So we're essentially repurposing those for this application. Now, proximity alarm is one thing, which the data flow is usually one-to-one, one-to-many. Now, the next one is group and social gatherings, right? When you start seeing a lot of employees gathered in one place, now we can set up an alert and push it in through the Salesforce Work Center alerting system, saying, hey, there's a lot of congregation in the cafeteria or in the kitchen or in the hallway. And then the health officer can make some provisions or work with shift management to organize a different time schedule for that task. So that's another way you can do this, is kind of detect group or social gatherings, which is a many-to-many relationship. And then finally, contact tracing, which you're looking at right here. So those are the three major applications we see for this application in the COVID-19 reopening state. There are so many other things you can do with this application from a retail perspective and from other industries for other real world location-based intelligence. But at this time, we're just focusing on the COVID-19 reopening. So combining these three needs at Softsquare, we built a consolidated mobile application. Can you go to the next slide, please? And our architecture, we kept it really simple. We call it edge intelligence. We have these mobile devices, let's call it cell phones for now. They are called the tracking bots. And then we have an agent that will take that information from the tracking bot and load it into the Salesforce employee record. So that's it. We kept it really straightforward and simple, and the bot is reusable, configurable for each organization. and deploying this is a breeze. It's a very straightforward, low friction technology. Now, this system can be repurposed to meet different needs, as I mentioned, but also remember there are other technologies that's out there, which is GPS, QR code, the badging system, NFC, near field contact, RFID, and other proximity gateways. The bot can be connected to any of those gateways and the data can be pushed right into Salesforce. Okay, now we're going to take a look at a live application, how it looks in Salesforce. Now this is the live application, and let's go ahead and jump right into the actual Salesforce component. Go ahead, our sales engineer, Kanmani, is going to show you the command center. Now this is the command center from work.com. As you can see, we have a section in the bottom now to send a survey out to the employees, and then go ahead and click that, please. And she's going to walk us through this process real quick. Go ahead, Kanmani.
Thank you, Alex. So now I'm going to send a survey to all the employees at this location. Let's imagine now I'm one of the employee, let's say William Brown. I get a link in my email. I click on the link. It's open up the survey. So the first thing is I just agree and consent so that I am going to share my information through the survey. So let me click next. So then I'm really asked a very simple question. Are you experiencing COVID-19 symptoms? Yes, I have a symptoms. So next. So have you been tested? Yes. So what was your result? So my result has been positive. So let me click next. And based on your response, we are going to get that every employee is accurate. So I'm going to click OK. So this is how the daily wellness survey will be processed. And now let me take a look of the survey response. So I'll be over to Alex. Thanks.
Yep, thank you, Kanmani. So she just took the survey. Now let's go ahead and take a look at how that survey result. So as we looked at the journey, according to salesforcework.com, when you do take the survey, if you fail, you would go into the contact tracking component. If you pass, you would go into the shift scheduling track. Kanmani, can you go back to the slide and just kind of bring up that journey real quick so they can see it? Go to the, yeah, there you go. So as you can see, this is where we are. She took the survey, and then if you pass the survey, you go into the shift management, and that whole workflow kicks off. Now, if you fail the survey, then you go right into this whole contact tracing, graph management, case management, and all that cycle. Okay, so let's get back to the application. So now let's say with William Brown, he has failed the survey. Now he's in the contact, now it's gone into the contact tracing track. And as you can see, there is the employee health survey that was already taken. There is a quarantine, isolation, hospitalization, and recovered. And in the middle of this, there's a vaccination, but at this point, we don't have it. So it's not there, but hopefully, eventually it'll be there. So we will have a vaccination part. So unfortunately, at this time, this is where we are. We are at the quarantine, isolation, recovery, and back to work. So looking at it from that perspective, this is the employee profile case details. Let's go ahead and take a look back at the Work Center one more time, please. Now, this is your centralized dashboard. So when you look at it, you can see your location status, your wellness status, your contact status. And as you can see in the contact status, there's monitored, not monitored, exposed. So you have all these different reports. And if you scroll down to the bottom, you can actually see alerts. And these alerts come from the beacon. So now let's go ahead and take a look at a beacon record, please, with the employee distance. So here, this is how that data is pushed from the mobile device, from the Softsquare's contact tracking system. The information is pushed to the Salesforce employee object. As you can see, William Brown has met with all these folks, and this is the distance. As you can see, most of it is less than the 6 feet violation. So this could be used for contact tracing. So let's go ahead and take a look at the actual graph of how the contact tracing looks. There you go. So it takes that information and plots it for you in a social graph. Now we are using all of the out-of-the-box solutions from Salesforce contact social graph. So we're not able to extend the width of the line. So for instance, if somebody was 7 feet or 6 feet away, we want the line to go a little further out. And if they're a little shorter, we want to bring them shorter. But we are working on making our own customized graph instead of using out of the box. But we would want our solution, we want it to sit seamlessly on top of the existing salesforcework.com module. And that's why we have not modified it. So that was a question we had in the previous webinar was, can you decrease or increase the distance of the different employees based on the distance that you get from your beacon, from your device? Unfortunately, it's a built-in package, so we can't do that. But if that request keeps coming up, then we will, modify or write a custom to provide a more visually appealing contact tracking visualization. So at this stage, you can see how we kind of took it from the mobile device all the way up to the Salesforce social graph, contact tracing graph here. Now we're going to go ahead and take a look at the next step, which Kanmani, can you go ahead and show there we go. So this is a critical part. After you're done with all this monitoring and tracking and tracing, how does the health officer, in this case, we're putting a lot of responsibility on the health officer. Now, Salesforce has already started creating a new term called contact tracer. There is certification for the contact tracer. And as it has been predicted, most organizations are going to have multiple contact tracers who may be helping the health officer to do this. Maybe every department may have a contact tracer. So how does the contact tracer manage this whole case? If they have 600 employees, how do they go about looking at this tracing, following up with everyone, updating it, and bringing them back? So when you look at it from that perspective, this contact tracing queue is a perfect way for a health officer, or as we call it, a contact tracer. That's what Salesforce is calling them. How would a contact tracer manage those 600 employees and make sure that they're ready to come back to work? So this is that one screen that really helps that health officer or contact tracer go through and look at each of the employees, see at what stage they are in, and kind of provide reopening or back to work dashboard for the organization. So saying that, I think that is kind of the last piece of all this, is this one queue, tracing queue. So we looked at the command center dashboard. We looked at how the employees are tracked, the social graph, and then we finally went right into the queue case management and to close the account. Now this can also be integrated with other systems like HR for vacation time or time off. All those components can be integrated from this workflow. Okay, saying that, let's get back to the slide, please.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Kanmani. Okay, so back at the slide. So we looked at how a system like this, a very simple contact tracking system, can go out there and kick off an entire process in Salesforce. Let's move to the next slide, please. And we looked at the journey. Again, we went to the contact tracing graph, the life event program enrollment, that is the case management. And then on a constant basis, the health officer is going to keep sending out surveys. And we pray that everyone recovers and is well and back to work again. And this cycle just repeats until we find a vaccine or we discover some other cure for this pandemic. So this is going to be business as usual, as normal. It's going to keep going in that circle. Okay, let's move to the next slide, please. this is our architecture that we're proposing, and we already have it implemented. And I think breaking it down into a bot and an agent, we can create a lot of edge intelligence. As Mr. Andy, our CEO, initially did not want a huge payload or huge data going out to the Sales Cloud. He wanted most of the consent, the privacy, and also the tracking done on the mobile device so that the employees can control how the social tracking is taking place. So we have implemented a lot of intelligence in the mobile device itself. So only a small piece of information goes out to Salesforce. Most of the processing of contact tracing, the distance locations, all those calculations are being done in the mobile device itself. Okay, saying that, I think that concludes our webinar for today, and thank you. We are going to open for questions, and please let me know if there's any questions. We'll hang out here for a few minutes to just answer any questions. Thank you again for attending, and stay safe. Okay, back to you, Sridhar.
Alex, hi. We've just got a question asking why are we using GPS? Why are we not using GPS to track the distance? And why are we using BLE instead of GPS or other technologies?
Oh, okay. The GPS. Okay, so maybe I should have made it clear. GPS unfortunately only works outdoor. Unless you put in some kind of a transmitter inside of the buildings. GPS is an outdoor satellite line of sight technology. It uses a global positioning satellite, and it requires a line of sight. There is GPS 2.0, and there's a lot of new technologies being developed, but GPS is a very expensive, complex infrastructure. We don't have the not line of sight GPS yet. So up until, I think, at least 2024, we have the standard line of sight GPS. So we can't track inside the building. And most of our employees and students in schools and universities, it's going to be indoor. And that's the challenge of using GPS. Now, using QR code, yes, again, QR code is a small sticker that you can stick in different locations. Unfortunately, that's also line of sight. The camera on the device has to see the QR code. And unfortunately, we can't detect the distance between how far away you are from the QR code, at least with the current technology. But there is some ways to detect the distance between the QR code and the mobile device, but it's not accurate. And it's also, it requires more work from the employee. They have to take out their phone and point it to the QR. So, and then the other two, the NFC, which is your existing badge, which is an RFID technology. Unfortunately, with the existing badge, those are passive RFID sensors. So they don't charge on signal. So you would have to put it close to a high power receiver that will charge the badge, boot up the badge, and the badge will send a signal back to it. So we don't have that level of inductive charging when it comes to contact tracing. So we can't have two employees come that close to get that inductive charging for NFC. So NFC is something that's kind of being slowly replaced with visual identification and some type of a Bluetooth low energy system. So, and then, so that's the reason. The short answer to you is GPS and other, some of these other technologies can't be used because of the line of sight limitation, and also the inconvenience of taking it out and trying to negotiate that contract. Okay, go ahead, Sridhar, next one.
Okay, thank you, Alex, and I hope that answers the question. We've got one more question, and this gentleman is asking whether the app is available for iPhones, and can it be downloaded from the App Store?
Yes, so both applications have gone through our rigorous testing. We have tested it with our parents, with our friends, with our partners, and we are starting to see some of the limitations of the devices. This uses a Bluetooth 4.0, BLE 4.0. Some of the older headsets does not have the Bluetooth 4.0. So if you don't have Bluetooth 4.0, the application would move to a manual tracking. So it would actually ask them to punch in the information. And so they would have to say, are you 6 feet away? Are you wearing a mask? It would have a manual way to track. So we do have a manual way to track if the Bluetooth 4.0 is not working or that particular device is unable to enable the 4.0 device. That's one limitation we're seeing. Another limitation we're seeing is if you use multiple 4.0 Bluetooth 4.0 devices, there is, let's say you're using a Bluetooth headset and you're using a few other health exercise equipments, and then you're trying to do contact tracing. So now you have multiple 4.0 signals, and it works, but sometimes some of the musical, the speaker takes more preference over our contact tracing app, so we don't get the signal in a reasonable amount of time. So we're seeing some small variations of that. Again, those are things that we can solve through software and manual tracking instead of automated Bluetooth tracking. Other than that, both the applications, again, we're following the CDC guidelines, the Apple and Android guidelines to create these proximity sensors using the Bluetooth technology. So both these applications should be in the App Store that you can download. But before we release it to the App Store, if you would like to get your own version to test out in your organization, we can customize because it needs to connect to the Salesforce work.com cloud. So we would have to make some customizations for that for you. We don't know your instance name and the details like that. So we would have to work with you, and we will give you a package that you can install on your iOS or your Android device so that you can. Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I think we're running out of time. Sorry.